Today we will watch a video from Tools on Tech from my good friend Buzz. I was surprised seeing his video popping up. Personal knowledge management is stupid, and I cannot wait to dive into what he has to say there and give a sprinkle in a few comments from mine in there. I haven't watched it as usual, so we do this together. So now without further ado, let's dive in.
Paperless movement, your productivity, your way.
Personal knowledge management is stupid. It's a solution to a problem we've created, costing us hours each day to maintain perfect little notes for our own satisfaction. And then when faced with any real-world questions, those notes crumble, leaving us scrambling to finding the answers we thought we had but can't find. So it's time to stop lying to ourselves and embrace a simpler way to manage information.
So this actually fits perfectly to a video that I published as well. Stop procrastinating using tools like Obsidian and Logseek, but as well Tana, Notion, you name it, PKM tools. Too many people, especially busy professionals, are doing too much work about work, and feeling productive being in these tools is just a lie to yourself, as Bas just mentioned here. So already a line that there is truth in there. Let's see if there's also something in the video telling us that there is actually an advantage having a PKM system.
Now, there's an old quote that says, half the money I spend on advertising is wasted. And the trouble is, I don't know which half. Note-taking often feels the same way. Half the notes you make are wasted, but you don't know which half. And while this uncertainty might be acceptable in advertising, where you can't always pinpoint who your audience is, in note-taking, the audience is clear, and that's you. Now, the interesting thing that happened...
I like it, okay? I want to interrupt him here quickly. So half the notes are wasted, and that's something that we say a lot to our clients as well. You have to understand the different types of information that you're collecting during a day. So I always ask myself when I capture something, is it something that I would Google faster later on if I Google it again? Will it take longer to find it in my PKM system? So I don't care, especially if I need to have the latest information, and that comes to the next information type, news. I never store news at all, because what's the point of something that just was announced? It's already outdated the next day. I don't want to clutter up my system with these information. And I think the third thing that people should understand is that we need to use several tools, or at least different sections inside one tool, in order to differentiate between shallow thinking and shallow knowledge and the deep thinking part, where we really dive into more complicated topics. And I think by differentiating between these different information types, this helps already a lot to declutter the system and only focus on the things that really matter. Know then what half of the notes that you take is actually worth having.
Happens is we start making systems. We're adding tools, adding automated processes, thinking we're making things easier for ourselves. But in reality, we're making things harder. The whole idea of capture now and organize later is a lie.
Absolutely, it is a total lie. So that's why we always capture and store it inside inboxes and then later on process them. So you actually organize it. So exactly what he says here, capture now and organize later. It is possible if you have proper routines in place, if you know where you captured it. So you have an inbox that you can process later, but then you have to understand where does it go. So it's perfectly legit when we think about the ICOR methodology to store information in an intermediate tool. So for example, the Apple Notes is a note-taking app that I rarely use, but I use it every now and then to quickly capture something that would just take too long to go another tool. Tana has a nice capturing feature as well, so that compensates for that. But sometimes it's still Apple Notes where I write things down quickly. The key is to know that you have something in a temporary tool. Even a piece of paper would be such thing, and then process it later into the final destination. So it really ends up where you can find it later on and where you can really make sense of it when you combine it or backlink it with information in your tool. So yes, capture now and organize later is a lie if you just keep capturing and you're cluttering up your note-taking system, because it ends up like many people have email inboxes where they have thousands of unread emails and they're just ignoring them, and they sign up to even more newsletters and everything is just cluttered up. That's the same thing that you will do by just capturing it and not thinking about what you do with the information later.
It doesn't help if I told you that for every hour you spent reading a book, you need 2 hours to sort through and organize your notes, then shouldn't you be rethinking that approach? Especially once you start time blocking and realize you don't have that much time in a day. When it comes to making
time blocking is a whole other story. We at the paperless movement don't believe in time blocking in the typical sense where people block 15 minutes for this task and 5 minutes for this task and 30 minutes. This is impossible. That's why on our calendars there are only proper meetings and events, and everything else is organized and prioritized inside our planner app, Sansama in this case, where we then have a prioritization and we can work on a sequential order through the tasks. And while the tasks take as long as they take during the day. But that's not the topic of this video.
taking notes, there's the concept of diverge and converge. While it's important to gather enough information during that diverge phase, we often end up collecting everything, creating a vast desert of knowledge with occasional rocks of insight. But because we are so busy exploring that desert, we don't have the time to look up and see the mountain in the distance and, well, basically walk in that general direction to get to some actual results. So shouldn't we be taking notes then? I don't think that's the issue. The real problem is being realistic about the amount of information. We can only process so much. And one of the things I see happening often is that we have so many systems and so much data that we spend way too much time trying to distill it all down to its core. So start filtering information.
Well, I can just nod here and agree with him. That's 100% true.
And be ruthless about it. What value does it add? Is it something you'll need in the future? Something you find interesting? Or are you just writing for yourself, which is also a value? Sometimes the goal isn't to capture everything, but simply to write, and that's okay. Be okay with not capturing everything, because you don't have to. We miss things every day. If you skip a day on social media, you'll miss posts, and that's perfectly fine, and it should be the same for your note-taking. So the first rule when making notes should be, what am I doing this for?
Yeah, I like this rule. I just want to add there, this is the FOMO, the fear of missing out, that you always have the feeling you have found something interesting and you saved there. So in our ICOR methodology, we talk about the capturing beast, where we differentiate between actual projects, key elements that are essential things in your life, and topics. And these can be thousands of things that you're just interested in, you came across, and so on. And this allows you to think about the different types of information in these categories. Is it really relevant to ongoing projects right now? Then you should store it somewhere. Key elements is something where you self-improvement, for example, or being a father, being a husband, things like that. That's a category that you come across something, it would be easy to fill in. And then the topics is really something where you can throw things in and forget about it. And again, in order to make this work, it's the easiest way to split the tools as well. That's why we are using Reader from Readwise, the Read Later app. And there we can quickly capture the things, save it in there, and so many things that I forgot later on. And I don't care at all. If I really want to find something, I could search in there. But usually it just gives me the satisfaction that I saved it somewhere, and I have the probability that I will find it later on again. And inside the Reader app, you have two different inboxes that you can have in there. And therefore, if there's really something important that I want to capture quickly and then move on to the other two, I would save it in the Later app. There are workarounds to still satisfy this FOMO, but this question, what am I doing this for, is the question that you should always ask yourself the moment you capture something, for sure.
When you stop taking notes on everything and limit your input, something magical happens. You realize that you don't need all this personal knowledge management stuff. Once you're okay with missing a few things, you'll find you can quickly search for information online whenever you need it. So what
just what I said in the beginning with the Google.
Value are your notes really bringing towards your workflow? When I started diving into productivity, I tracked if people got back to me. And then I discovered that a lot of people never responded. They just forget about you because they are not constantly thinking about you. In the real world, people...
Isn't it sad? not everybody is constantly thinking about you, boss. Nobody thinks about me, Tom Solid. The moment you move on to the next video on YouTube, people might have forgotten us. So that's why we have to keep turning up, so you guys don't forget us.
People forget things all the time, and that's fully accepted. You only notice because you started taking notes and became aware that they were skipping it. But it's okay to forget stuff. People don't really care. I used to get frustrated when people didn't respond and felt that I had to chase them. And then I realized everyone does this all the time. And it was me that was being the weird one because I was keeping track and never forgetting. Less notes mean less maintenance. Like many aspects in your life, for example, stuff around your house, if you have less of it, it's less work to organize and find stuff. And
that's a good metaphor that he brought in, or comparison. That's exactly the thing. The less things you have, the less things you have to think about. And that's something I realized as well, where I go into a direction of minimalism, not 100%, but it feels so much, you gain freedom the less you have that you have to care about, and that's great when it comes to tools.
as you cram less things into your day, less tasks, less notes, fewer actions,
Well, less tasks is not always possible, obviously, especially if you're working company and you're getting a lot of tasks. But being aware how many tasks you have and being aware in what projects you work, you have the numbers that you can give to your manager later on in order to justify that you're overworked and you're having too many tasks. Most of them are usually stupid things where you're helping other people to achieve their goals while your own goals suffer and things like that. Again, having the clarity and realization about these things help you to justify adjustments in your system and how much you do on a daily basis. So it's perfectly doable no matter the situation you're in.
all those structures you build are less needed. Now, these productivity systems you build can still help, but you only see real benefits when instead of trying to add more, you start slowing down a little bit and start freeing up time. Time to think, time to relax, time to be human. In our frenzy to do more in less time, we often lose our humanity. Another thing I've noticed is that we need to accept the chaos. You shouldn't spend a lot of time organizing your notes to the point of trying to create this perfect, polished set. Instead, focus on taking notes and accepting that organizing them is a task for future you.
That's a good point, actually. Accept the chaos. A lot of our members, they want to join Tana, they want to start using Tana or Notion or things like that. These tools are prone to make it tempting to start the perfect organization of your information. It's so easy to create databases and connect them, interconnected databases, backlinking and all these things. But we always say, just use it in the very basics first, and that's hard to do. ClickUp is also something when it comes to project management. You can overbloat these tools so easily that it becomes really hard to manage them and stay in control of the things. The simpler you keep things, the easier it is. Then establish your workflows, run them a few weeks, even months, and then slightly put another thing on top of it that really makes sense then to enhance your system. Instead of trying to think about the perfect system, implement all this, it can take weeks in order to get to the final thing that you really wanted to build. And especially when you roll it out for the team, then it is put to the real world test, and then usually it fails and crumbles and everybody is frustrated, including yourself. And that's no difference for the PKM systems. Try to keep it as simple as possible. The important thing is that you use a tool on a daily basis to really learn about that tool. Forget about the shiny object. If you said that's the tool I want to use from now on, then use it for 6 months and see how it goes after 6 months. But by consistently switching, you will never reach the point where you really start mastering the tool and understanding the actual friction points. But on the other hand, you will learn about all the opportunities that you have to expand what you're working on. It's really not that easy to nail this one.
Don't know which notes will be useful, so don't stress over it now. Now, I split notes into topic notes and journaling. And for topic notes, it's very simple. I just have a notepad with the topic name and I put stuff in there. Or with Logseek, I just mark notes in my journal and then link them towards a topic and organize later. And then my journal, I care even less about, because that's more about keeping track what I do throughout the day. And I probably won't be referring to that. It's simply getting it out of my brain and writing it down and being able to scroll back in time and see what I've done in the last couple of days.
And that's why it's so beautiful in Tana and Heptabase, the tools that we use. There are journals in there as well. I'm not sure if Logseek has this as well. I guess so. Many tools have this now. So you have a daily notes that you can just start filling up with things and then forget about it later on. The beauty about this in Tana especially, it's so easy to link things together and add things very quickly to databases that while you're capturing, you already organizing things if you know what you're doing. That's the thing. But I think the key here is really the journaling is really worth it, as you have a track record of that day, and at least you have the reference to those notes by that date that you have taken the notes. Because now you can go back on the calendar, well, there was this meeting and I remember something, and you at least can look at your calendar, find the meeting, go then to this note in the date, and then there you have it. You have the reference that you have written down there, and you can remember things much easier. So journaling, certainly worth it. Also putting it out of your brain into your digital tool. This is also a great exercise, because by doing that, by taking notes, you're already thinking through it. So usually it burns this information into your brain already by just doing that. And scientific studies show handwriting is even more helpful in this regards, because you can keep these things much easier in mind by handwriting due to the different patterns that you create and images that you create by the custom handwriting that you do with each word compared to typed text. But that's something I don't do that as much, because I'm a touch typer and I'm writing so fast with the keyboard that I could never catch up with a pencil or pen this way. That's the reason why, to me, usually I go to Tana, open up the journal and take my meeting notes, and that's it.
I don't need to organize those. They're already organized by date. And another thing with
organized by date, exactly what I just described there.
Journal notes is that it's not so much about what I'm writing down, but sometimes it's more about the process. And if I don't care about the process and I don't care about the output, one of the things I like is just sitting down with pen and paper or my books and just going towards a couch.
There we go. He got also books. So I really have to check out books as well, as I showed you in another reaction video, that books has also the reader app in there. I'm getting one and I'm checking it out for sure.
And relaxing and enjoying the writing process. That's not fast, that's not speedy. I can type really fast on my keyboard compared to writing, but it's about relaxing, about reflecting back while I'm writing down. So notes don't have to be perfect. Those can be a bit messy. It's a brain dump. My brain's messy, so my notes will be messy. And I'm not going to then go back and organize those notes, because the goal of the notes wasn't to get pristine organized. The goal of those notes were just to relax and basically have a conversation with the paper, to think about what's in my head. And sometimes while I'm doing that, of course, there will be some follow-up things that I want to write down, but that's the joy of paper. I'll just chuck it to the side and I'll process just those few gems that pop up later, and then the rest I discard because I'll never look at it. I have a whole bookcase full of paper journals that I keep, I don't know, from a nostalgic perspective, but when am I ever going to read those? Sometimes maybe for the fun of it, open one up from 5 years ago and see what I was doing on Wednesday the 26th of June. Great, awesome that you can. But is that really adding value to my life?
Yeah, I agree. And that's also something that we tell many members or many other in the community. If they're afraid, oh man, I was using Evernote for 10 years and what happens to all my notes if I move on to another tool and so on, you will probably never look it up again. That's the same with the school notes that I had. I had dozens of old notes from my schools and from studying and a PhD. Yeah, nostalgic reasons. So I keep one of them for the study, but I won't get real value out of this old stuff because it's so outdated that it's no longer relevant. So I 100% agree with him here.
And does that need a system? Now, if you're thinking about what would be the best app or that your app will solve this, you haven't really been paying attention. It's not about the app. It's about the workflow. When your workflow eliminates unnecessary steps, information, everything just becomes easier. You could use something as simple as Notepad and still have a workable solution. Some people do. Of course, some software like Logseek, which I personally love, obviously, can help streamline that process, but it's not essential. I could do my notes perfectly well without Logseek because I limit what I write down.
And that's what we are preaching as well with ICOR to all our members, the same thing. If you really understand the concepts and workflows on how you take notes and how you get things done, it doesn't matter the tools. Paco, our co-founder, and I, if you give us a new tool, or if Tana decides, oh, we won't publish the tool at all, we will move on. Yes, there might be some notes left on the way, which I just explained, and Bas as well. So what? But we will move on to the next tool. We take our tool agnostic concepts and workflows with us to the next tool, and then we will keep going. It doesn't matter what Bas just described. If you nail it on a notepad and you move on to something to Logseek, you understand how to leverage these tools to really enhance your note taking and the retrieval of information, and not just for the sake of having a fancy tool that allows you cross-linking and you have no idea what's the point about all this. In most cases, the simple tools are more than enough to be productive as a busy professional. Is 100% sure about that.
This is why some people can effectively work on paper while digital tool users would wonder how they keep track of everything. They keep track of less and know where it is because it's confined to just a few pages. Writing stuff down by definition limits you in what you can write, so you have to focus on the highlights. And
that's also the point of writing everything down. It's much more important to understand where to find information that you need later on, rather than writing or duplicating this information into your own system. That's where people during a lesson, if they record everything of the lesson, that's not helpful. Or when you do highlights while reading a book. Yes, we all know it. The book is probably already condensed down to give you really the best value. So we are tempted to highlight everything there because everything makes sense. But would you then read the highlights? Yeah, well then read the book again. Doesn't matter. That's really the thing. But if I really want to look up something important inside the book, that might be then something that I need to place somewhere else that links back to this original source. And it's the same for business information. If the business should have a proper business knowledge management system where you have all the business documentation saved and the SOPs, the work instructions, things like that, then just put a link to these things inside your note-taking system to make it easy to access this information, instead of starting to copy this information into your own business knowledge management, into your own personal knowledge management, because you're messing things up. You then have already an outdated version. Whenever this work instruction gets updated, you are left with this outdated version, and then it becomes really hard to keep things up to date in your PKM system. So that's why I rarely copy paste things into my PKM. It's really just the conclusions that I made and then link out to the different sources that I got this from.
And to me, that is like the first step to enlightenment in note-taking. Letting go of the obsession with finding the best app and instead focusing on what you actually want to write down. Think about what your future self will find valuable. Most of the time, you don't need to write it down. Either it's important and you'll remember it, or it's not important and you won't look it up. The key is to be selective about what you capture, ensuring it truly adds value.
Amen to that.
So as a conclusion, when you're thinking about note-taking, what you're writing down are your thoughts. And one of the things that I just see too much is people trying to basically make a cheap ass copy of Wikipedia on their own system. Don't do that. We have search, and yes, search has become worse over time, but we can still find information that's relevant. So write down your thoughts, your notes, the things that you were thinking while you were seeing or reading it, and link back to whatever is there.
There we go. Exactly. We are so like-minded.
Because then you write down less. You don't need a copy of the internet. What you need are your personal thoughts and ideas, and less of them. Because we don't have time to solve all the world problems, and you don't have time to make notes of the whole internet as a thing, because it's just too large. Focus on what you find really interesting and just take notes on that. And for the rest, be okay with, accepting that you might have to do a Google search and do some research if you ever need that specific topic, which you probably won't. And your life will be better for it. Stop trying to make complex systems to get all the information to work, and just take less notes and abandon those systems. Or, and that's the most important part of it, if you do have those systems, make them work for you instead of you working for the system. Now, remember, you're awesome. Keep it up, and see you in the next one.
Bas, what an amazing video. I loved it. And as usual, we speaking the same language, obviously, because so many things that you mentioned in there are especially what we teach as well at the Paperless Movement. So keep up the great work, great video. And I'm happy that I watched it. So you guys out there, make sure to also subscribe to Bas' channel, Tools on Tech, and let us know in the comments below what you think about this. How complex is your PKM system? And I'll catch you up in the next one.